Hi, everybody. Today is Friday, January 31st, and our friend Pepe Escobar is back with us. Welcome back, Pepe.
My pleasure, Nima. Always to see your fabulous smile. And to all of you, our audience, greetings from Moscow. It's afternoon here. No winter. Everything is very, very calm, and everybody getting ready for the weekend.
Let's get started, Pepe, with what Donald Trump said on his social media. He is threatening BRICS countries with 100% tariffs on them, and he's talking about the new currency, a new currency for BRICS. And Peskov responded that we were never after a new currency for BRICS. We are inventing or we are after a new system of trades. How, what's your take on what is happening in the mind of Donald Trump and the people who are giving him information? Is that right? Is BRICS looking for a new currency?
Okay, allow me to, burst out laughing because this proves that Mr. Disco Inferno himself, as I thought you might call him to Sputnik this week, and his coterie, people all around him, they don't have a bloody clue what BRICS is actually doing. Obviously, they don't know anything that was discussed at the summit in Kazan in October, 1 month before the American election. Obviously, they haven't tracked what BRICS did last year and what they plan to do ahead in terms of trying to fine tune the international system, financial, geoeconomic, but not coming with a new BRICS currency. This is something that they have said repeatedly over and over again, especially during last year in all those meetings, the preparatory meetings for Kazan, the BRICS Business Council meetings, coming from Putin, from Lavrov, from Ryabkov, from everybody. So obviously, these people don't do their homework, which is more than obvious when it comes to how the Beltway and Washington work. They have no clue about the rest of the world, period. And this is not stopping with this new administration. And obviously, Peskov, with the patience of 10,000 Buddhist monks in a cave in Gansu province, he has to say, look, this is not what we're doing. We're trying to find alternative modes of payment, which is what they are actually doing. And this is what they are actually implementing. So BRICS currency, it's irrelevant at this point because what we're already seeing, starting with bilateral Russia-China relations, where 95% or so is already in yuan and rubles, is traded in their own currencies, which is something more than obvious, bypassing the US dollar without saying that you're bypassing the US dollar. You're just ignoring the US dollar. It's a completely different story, which is what's going to happen from now on. Even more forcefully between Iran and Russia after they sign the strategic partnership. Everything will be in their local, all their trade is going to be in their local currencies. And this is going to spread out across the BRICS. Even so called BRICS that are not exactly BRICS because they are on the fence, like Saudi Arabia, it's the rise of the petro yuan, which is already a reality. So obviously, this is too complicated for Trump to, he doesn't read, and he doesn't read the most important non-US think tank reports saying what's going on geoeconomically across the world. So he spills out something that, coming from a president of the US, is frankly stupid because he is condemning something that is not even happening.
And here comes the question in the mind of the Trump administration. It seems that not only a BRICS currency, but they're trying to force these countries to trade in US dollar. That's the
Exactly.
main reason that they're talking this way. But how is that going to happen if they put tremendous sanctions on Russia, for example, on Iran, on other countries? At the same time, you want them to use US dollar. You sanction them, and you want on the two things that don't come together in any
Of
sort of
course not.
technology.
You're right, Dima. First of all, the absurdity of ignoring what the not the rest of the world, the global majority is trying to do. That's number one. Number two, the key point is what Michael Hudson has explained in his latest essay. And I included the link in this Disco Inferno column earlier this week. Everybody should read Michael's latest essay. You can read it in English at his website or at globalsouth.co. There are already translations in Portuguese and in Spanish. Very, very important. He's basically saying that Trump has declared war against the rest of the world. Absolutely correct, because what he's just reaffirmed with his 100% tariffs coming on BRICS. And the most important point is that this war is intrinsically related to what Michael says is the main problem, which is foreign debt in US dollars. Most of the global south, their foreign debt to IMF, World Bank, international financial system, loan sharks, the usual suspects, right, is in US dollars. It's essentially unpayable. Or if you pay what you owe to these loan sharks, you'll never develop as a sovereign nation. So Michael goes straight to the point. He says, if there is not a solution, or if the global south as a whole does not decide to, we're not going to pay this foreign debt anymore, because they're paying interest over interest over interest over interest. So in the end, they'll spend their several lifetimes paying the debt. If you don't solve this problem, you don't solve the problem of development of a great deal of the global south. Obviously, from an American point of view, this is what they want this to keep going, because this is how they exploit essentially the rest of the world. When they don't go straight for plunder and destroying nations or bombing nations into democracy, this is how they do it. It's a financial op. It's basically interest over interest on this eternal foreign debt. So that's why everyone should read that essay to look at the big picture. And obviously, Trump would never frame it this way, because only analysts who understand how the empire works, they frame it this way. The empire is a completely different operation, because it's an empire of plunder. And based on what Michael has described in detail as fire, financialization forever on everything, and inbuilt in that marketization of everything, including the way they want to marketize artificial intelligence. And then the Chinese with Deepseek and with others that will be coming, they broke completely this business model in these past few days. The insurance industry all over the world is basically controlled by Atlanticist interests, and real estate speculation. So this is the basis of the empire of plunder is fire, as defined by Michael. So if you don't try to dismantle fire and dismantle the foreign debt forever, it's impossible for the global south, BRICS or no BRICS, to keep developing. So this is the absolute key point. Absolute key point, And now the stage is set, because instinctively, Trump has already launched a war against the BRICS. This is something that many of us had been saying even before the inauguration. There's going to be a war against BRICS in 2025. Yes, and that's it. Now it's on. So now it's up to BRICS and other multilateral organizations working closely to BRICS to devise their, I would say, more streamlined game planning on parallel systems and alternative payment systems, and more getting totally into payment settlements in their own currencies, intra-BRICS and BRICS with the outsiders in the global majority. So this is the big geoeconomic game during the Trump presidency and beyond. In fact,
It seems that the first two countries that would be tariffed by Donald Trump and his administration going to be Canada and Mexico.
Mexico, yes,
And
25%, which is a lot.
why is he starting this way? And what's the importance of that for Donald Trump?
Well, it's basically reintegrated the North American market and subordinating the North American market to the empire completely. You do the same our way or the highway. If you don't know what we want, we're going to slap sanctions on you ad infinitum. And the next in line is going to be the EU, probably in a matter of a few weeks after that, or maximum March, mid-March, etc. And then China. And then we're going to have the real deal, Nima. I'm sure our audience remembers the tsunami of Trump sanctions against China. The big ones, I think, starting 2018. He came to power early 2017, and the big tsunami came in 2018, especially on China's tech sector. Just look at the China tech sector now in 2025, where, according to latest reports in the tech industry everywhere, China is ahead of the US in virtually everything. It's like a matter of more than 80% of all vital industrial and tech sectors. So this is part of what the Chinese had planned way before Trump 1.0, their program Made in China 2025, which even after Trump sanctions, they kept doing what they had planned without calling it Made in China 2025. Very Chinese. And that explains everything, including the Deepseek breakthrough, which apparently, at least from the point of view of Silicon Valley and Wall Street, came out of nowhere. No, if you were following what the Chinese were doing, it came out of a very specific investment and technology center program, part of the Made in China 2025. If you see by item, artificial intelligence, quantum computing, solar panels, electric vehicles, etc. Everything was detailed by the Chinese already in the past decade, in detail, everything. And the great thing about centralized socialist economy, but based on meritocracy, not based on Wall Street gains, is that the results are tangible. And when they happen, everybody, how did they do that? It's very simple. Planning, competence, meritocracy, high-level standards at the best Chinese universities. For instance, all those kids and all these guys who are working on Deepseek, they graduated on the top Chinese universities. Not that they were important from Yale or Ivy or any Ivy League. No, indigenous, local. So this is how you do it, And obviously, in terms of the vision, the overall vision for Chinese tech, we can say it's people-centered, applying one of their metaphors. Very, very, Xi Jinping is very fond of these metaphors. It is people-centered. It's not stock exchange-centered. And that's all the difference. That's all you need to know.
I don't know if you watched the video in which the CEO of OpenAI, ChatGPT, was talking with Indians. And he said that you're not able to. They were asking him if they would be able to make a new AI for Indians. He said that that's not possible. Don't go that way. You're going to waste your time doing this. And you see right now, China is able to put something substantial, something important, as you see, Deepseek, and we've learned about Alibaba.
Their model, exactly.
It's totally game changer, and it shows how China is changing the game in terms of technology, in terms of the way that you can fight and defeat your enemy or your rival. And at the same time, Donald Trump is talking about the Iron Dome for the United States. It's unbelievable. You look at the way that they see it's all about military in their mind. It's
Of
not
course.
going to change.
And based on paradigms that have proven themselves to be failing all across the spectrum. The Iron Dome in Israel is a joke. The Houthis prove that it's a joke. The Iranians prove that it's a joke. And he wants to do an Iron Dome in the US. It will be the equivalent of an F-35 program multiplied by 10. Look at the F-35. We don't need to say anything about it. Now they crash spontaneously. Probably there's a Zeus, a Thunderbolt. By the way, another sneak. Look what this is one of the. They gave me another sneak this week, and the great thing, Lima, is that inside you have actual
Oh,
snakes. They don't know. So this is what the Americans are doing. We have an orange snake, most powerful symbol, which they don't. And inside you have, okay, you can maybe eat this thing. The Russians, no. You can eat this thing, but you actually have the real orange snake, which was the product of what? Physics, mathematics, great universities, lots of research coming, out of decades of research. And then you have Orishnik, which is the practical result. Same thing with the Chinese AI models. Everything was planned, and everything is the fruit of deep research. It's not blah, blah, blah for Wall Street shareholders. It's the absolute mega difference between casino capitalism, casino neoliberalism, and neoliberal exploitation and marketization of everything, including life itself, and meritocratic systems like the Chinese system, based on study, lots of study and application, and the Soviet then Russian system, which in terms of high technology is in a class by itself as well.
what was the importance of these new two AI from China? And we know that the United States, the stock market in the United States was shocked and it went all down. Is that gonna change the policy? Because it was so important. At least when you see Donald Trump, mostly is concerned about the economy of the United States, the trades of the United States. What influence does it would it have on the policy, on the strategy of the United States, in your opinion?
It's not a strategy of the United States. It's a strategy of a certain Silicon Valley players, very, very few ones. Wall Street is a reflection of what they are doing. And let's say the speculation megaphone of what Silicon Valley is doing. They're going to put a lot of extra money in their own research. There's no question about that. I outlined some of it in my column, in the Disco Inferno column. In fact, this column, I what we are discussing, I more or less using a disco metaphor from the 70s to make it more packable for a large audience. But what's inside is very serious, because these are the three challenges for Trump 2.0. The tech war against China, which now they are looking around and said, oh, we thought we had won that. No, there's a long way ahead. These are the first stages of the artificial intelligence war, for instance. We are in round one. The second one is what Michael Hudson details, and Trump just confirmed the war against the BRICS, which is the war against the global majority. And the third point is Ukraine, which we're going to be talking about, of course. How Trump is trying to position himself to bombastically announce something about Ukraine, which probably won't have anything to do with real life and what's actually happening live in the battlefields in Novorossiya, not to mention what the Russians want out of the whole thing. So these are the three top themes, right? But in terms of the tech war against China, we are on round one of a total tech war, no questions. And the disparity of funds is gigantic. Silicon Valley and American investors on one side with hundreds of billions of dollars. The Chinese are doing this on the cheap. with, but with their intellectual firepower and a lot of planning ahead very well, like Huawei was always planning ahead. I visited the Huawei lab in Shenzhen nearly 10 years ago, Nima. I was there in 2016. It was almost 10 years ago. Lots of the stuff that you see around, they were already testing it in Shenzhen in 2016. This is what how you do it, you know. And the concentration of intellectual firepower in that campus in Shenzhen was already extraordinary. Now they expanded the campuses. Even Huawei is like the center of an industrial tech matrix in China. There's a guy who published an outstanding map. You can try to find him. His name is sorry, Kyle Chen, and I think I put it on my Telegram channel, and the diagram is fascinating because everything is integrated: drones, autonomous vehicles, artificial intelligence, semiconductors, smartphones, humanoid robots, industrial robots, electric vehicles, batteries, etc. And you have all the companies that are doing this. So then you have interlinked everybody, and at the center, Huawei, of course. But you have DJI, the largest manufacturer of drones in the world, BYD, electric vehicles, SMIC semiconductors, Oppo. They started with phones and now they're going all over the place. Alibaba, ByteDance, Tencent, Cherry cars. So the Chinese, with a fraction of those that tsunami of dollars that the Americans have, they created their own tech industrial ecosystem. It's like if it was a metaphor for the multinodal world, which is the best definition of what we're aiming at, much better than multipolar. They created this multinodal ecosystem where all these industries are interlinked, talk to each other, and they're sharing their research progress. This is one of the reasons that explains what Huawei was doing and now and continues to do even under sanctions, and the Deepseek phenomenon. It's not out of the blue. It requires a lot of planning, a lot of interlocked planning, and a central government that is more or less supervising all that and listening to these players, to their suggestions. If they need help, they'll get help. This is how it works.
What's so fascinating about China is that everything they produce is high quality and low in terms of the price of the product. And we saw this in this DeepSeek and Alibaba AI. On the other hand, whatever the United States produces is so expensive. And this could be the main reason for the military industrial complex to be defeated in Ukraine, because they couldn't produce the way that Russia is producing. Russia is outproducing the whole West in Ukraine.
The whole West.
And here comes the question: are they going to change their strategy? Are they going to change their manner? Because the way that it's almost impossible for many countries. They don't have that much of wealth to buy products. Let me give you an example. Two cars were tested. One of them by BYD. It was a electric car, BYD, and the other one a British car. One of the British car was it's about $1.5 million, and BYD it's a $200,000. And BYD defeated the British car. And this is the future. I can see it here in Brazil. They're changing everything. It's dominating the industry here in Brazil. And it has to be, it's a great, if I were American, that was of great importance for me, to understand what China is doing, how they can achieve that, what's their strategy, what's their plan for the future. But when you see the United States still talking about the conflict in Ukraine, Middle East, you don't see that sort of vision. Even in the Trump administration, we were hoping that they're going to change the strategy on the part of the United States.
First of all, they don't have a strategy, Nima, so they cannot change something they don't have. They have quarterly earnings, and they have speculation on Wall Street. This is the definition of casino capitalism. That's it. Second, initial reactions to Deepseek. We had two main reactions. American politicians, let's sanction the Chinese even more. Second reaction, coming from OpenAI, for instance. They copied our model, which is the equivalent of who was the idiot who said that the Russians copied hypersonic? I'm sorry, the president of the United States himself. He said that the Americans copied the hypersonic designs from the Russians copied the hypersonic designs from the US. Oops. So what does that tell you? First of all, that they're blind to what the rest of the world is doing, because it's a hubristic thing of all decaying empires. You consider the rest of the world inferior to what you're doing, what you did, and how did you get to the top. And second, because the logic of financial capitalism and casino capitalism is more and more profits at the stock exchange over and over again. This is the only value. It's not providing a very good product to consumers, long lasting, and with enough service so you keep the consumer attached to your brand. I'll give an example. There is a revolt that I have noticed, which is now becoming global, against Apple products. Well, I am part of this because I use Apple. I have 4 or 5 different Apple gadgets. And people are getting extremely pissed with the price they have to pay for all these gadgets, all these upgrades that don't satisfy what they really need in the end, and the fact that you are confined into the Apple ecosystem and you cannot interact with other tech systems. So all over, we hear this from Latin America, from Africa, from Europe as well. People, that's it. We want to get out of it. So there is a lot of people who are moving into Linux, for instance. They can't stand dealing with Apple anymore. That's just one example. Because Apple was hubris. They thought they had cornered the market. They sold themselves as the coolest tech thing in the universe. And there was no follow-up, essentially. When they launched one iPhone after another with virtually no difference, with an absolute horrible markup, people around the world, they say, why do we need this when we can buy a fabulous Vivo or Oppo for 20% or 30% of the price? So once again, that's the inner logic, of the system, and not paying attention to not paying attention to what customers really want or are able to pay, especially in times of a geoeconomic crisis.
One of the main issues right now in the mind of the people, decision makers in the United States, is the issue of Taiwan. And they were talking about arming Taiwan, fighting for Taiwan, or even Republicans were talking about bombing Taiwan in order to not let. If you remember, Vivek Ramaswamy was talking this way during the 2024 presidential election. And right now, Donald Trump is talking about putting tariffs on the productions and the semiconductor production in Taiwan in order to bring them back to the United States. How is that going to influence the United States position in Taiwan and the policies of Taiwanese government?
I'll answer to you when I go to China later. In fact, maybe in 2 months from now, I'll be going to China. I need to go back to China. I haven't been in China for a while to keep up with China. It's a daily it's a daily endeavor, right? Taiwan is not an issue for China. Taiwan is an issue for the empire because they need to create an issue in the South China Sea. And this now, whatever happens in you change administration in Washington and the blah, 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 still the same. And now with a president who doesn't even know what ASEAN means. I prefer not even get into it because he will look even more embarrassing. So it's not an issue. And the Chinese are concentrated on their domestic economy, on the tech war, waiting for the sanctions. How are they going to react to the sanctions? And Taiwan now is in the back burner. So they will react when the time comes. And if this administration starts something, having weird ideas about Taiwan, which is something that might happen. But it's not, from the Chinese point of view, it's the matter is settled. And they're following what Deng Xiaoping said, even before 1997. Taiwan will be back before 2049. That's it. So the Chinese can always, just stay there and wait until 2049 when all the conditions will be ripe for the return of Taiwan. Simple. Peaceful return, of course. But the Americans don't have a lot of leeway against China in East Asia as a whole. Their only leeway would be to provoke via a false flag something the South China Sea using Taiwan in a using Ukraine sense. That's why the Chinese have been observing everything, even before the SMO, what's going on in Ukraine. They're learning their lessons of how the empire deals with a Trojan horse like this. And they will never allow Taiwan to become a Trojan horse against China. Period. That's the short answer.
Yeah. And getting to the conflict in Ukraine, that right now is getting so much attention because of Donald Trump talking the way that we were not expecting, that he's gonna talk about Ukraine the way that the Biden administration, in fact, was inventing this way and was putting out this way. But here comes Vladimir Putin. For the first time, I saw that he's putting out a video message talking with the people in the West. What was the main reason of that, in your opinion, and what that could bring to the conflict in Ukraine?
A soft power exercise. Why not? For the moment, nothing is happening. And Peskov already said they haven't even received a tentative message trying to schedule that famous phone call. So nothing happened from the Trump side, the Trump administration as a whole, his host of advisors, all those leaks about a possible ceasefire or peace plan that's going to be presented, everything that the Russians read. And I'm here for 4 days. It's not enough yet. In the next few days, I'll have a much better grasp of corridors of power in Moscow and what they are discussing about the non-action by the Trump administration so far. For the moment, they are like sphinxes, the Russians. They're just observing everything, They don't even need to move. They see, obviously, what I described as a disco inferno on the other side, Everybody has to dance to the sound of a master DJ Donald Trump, but there's no action. There's no strategizing. There are no actual proposals. Everything that comes out that is leaked concerning Ukraine, the Russians read it and they say, well, this is a joke. This is not even Minsk 3. This is a sub-Minsk 3. We're not going to sign this thing. Forget it. And Putin already said the obvious, in fact. That head of a criminal gang in Kiev is not a legitimate leader. So that Russia won't negotiate with somebody like that who has no legitimacy. If there is a legitimate leader in Kiev, they will negotiate later. But the negotiation is between the US and Russia. Everybody knows that. The Europeans don't even count. The Europeans are less than chihuahuas in this case. They'll have to just yap and follow the leader. So there's nothing that the Russians can do at the moment. Their position is very clear. It has been explained by Putin over and over and over again last year in all those forums, during the BRICS, after the BRICS, at the Valdai, at his press conference at the end of the year, everything. Everybody knows that. If you do your homework and you pay attention, like the Trump administration has not done its homework on BRICS. So we can assume that they didn't do their homework in terms of studying what Putin has been explaining is the official Russian position on trying to find a solution for Ukraine. So once again, Nima, it's what Lavrov told us 1 year ago, when a small group of us met with Lavrov in February last year. And he told us, look, we try everything, but there are no interlocutors on the other side. And at the moment, in Washington, there are still no interlocutors. We don't know what Special Envoy Kellogg is doing. I'm not sure he's talking to his counterparts here in Moscow so far, And ceasefire, peacekeeping idea that has been floated, it's pathetic. So what's happening on the ground? Russia's advancing steadily, day after day after day, and they can keep on going. And after a few breakthroughs that may happen in the next few weeks, the whole of West and Southwest Ukraine is open for Russia. They can keep on going everywhere they want. So that's it. And this explains why even the foreign ministry here, which is arguably the most competent foreign ministry in the world, Lavrov himself has been saying, it will be decided in the battlefield. And it will. Because coming back to what Trump may offer the US, the Russians, nothing. He has nothing to offer. His hand is very, very weak. The Russians know it, and the best American analysts know it. Trump doesn't know it, obviously, because he's being fed bullshit by the CIA full time. So he doesn't know what's happening in the Russian economy, in the corridors of power in Moscow, the public opinion expectations in Russia for the resolution in Ukraine, the sacrifices that Russia made these almost 3 years of war, the underlying causes of the war, indivisibility of security, which is an expression that Trump doesn't even know what it means. He never even pronounced it. And it's at the basis of everything that started to happen before the SMO, when they sent those letters in December 2021, and the Americans didn't respond. It was proposing a wider discussion on indivisibility of security in the NATO stand space and in Eurasia, everybody, all the players together. The Americans didn't respond. So this tells us that, once again, we have a lot of sound and fury, literally, to quote Shakespeare, on the other side. And on the Russian side, I would say enlightened silence. With maybe a little smirk, not too much, but more a smirk of perplexity. Why these people are not even trying to talk to us? For the moment, nothing. It's just blah, blah, blah.
But at least they're talking with the Ukrainians, and the head of intelligence in Ukraine said that the situation is so dire and they're going to collapse before summer coming.
It's the first time that they actually admit it on the record, Nima. That's huge. That's huge. And this tells us how dire the situation is. Until yesterday, they were until Kursk and until the first weeks after Kursk, they're saying, now this is our counteroffensive. Now we're going to force Russia on the table. Now we have control of Russian land, blah, blah, blah. Now it's different. The whole thing is collapsing. Everybody knows it, especially with this 90-day freeze. This was a very, very tricky maneuver, which may be interpreted as the Trump administration pulling the rug out of under Zelensky. It's quite possible, quite possible. And they calculated 90 days because the whole thing could collapse in 90 days. It's also feasible. Or it could be just, okay, let's test the waters and see how it goes. But if this is option number 2, it betrays lack of strategy. If it's option number 1, there may be some sort of strategy behind. And the strategy will be, let's get rid of this idiot in Kiev, because we're going to have to negotiate directly with the Russians. And the Russians are going to say, we're not going to talk to this idiot in Kiev. Everybody knows that, even in Washington. So they'll have a new legitimate player in Kiev to sign something. And obviously, this is no guarantee that the Russians will sign anything, because they know the empire is non-agreement capable. Definition coming from Lavrov himself. So only if there are ironclad guarantees that what Russia wants, neutral Ukraine, never getting into NATO, can get into the European Union later, it's okay, doesn't matter. Reparations for Russia, financial, at least, end of this SWIFT bullshit, recovering Russian assets that were apprehended by the West, you name it. If these conditions are not met, the Russians don't care. They can keep doing what they're doing.
If you remember, Donald Trump was talking about how he's going to put pressure on Saudi Arabia to reduce the price of oil, and we have the response.
That was so beautiful, Nima. Like, I laughed. This is my column that was not, it's probably coming out today. I opened with that. Trump says, Trump, in fact, threatens OPEC and OPEC Plus. You have to lower the price of oil, otherwise, blah, 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 blah. So OPEC Plus, they have a meeting and say, we're not going to do anything. It stays like it is. The price of oil at the moment is fine with us. We're going to cut production, which is something that we had already decided maybe in a month or two, and that's it. We're not going to change anything. So imperial diktats don't cut it anymore. Nobody even pays attention, and including Saudi Arabia, which is a Trump darling, which has already promised via MBS calling Trump saying, we're going to, invest $600 billion, which they don't even have that kind of money, in 4 years in the American economy, producing American jobs and all that. And Trump said, great, why not 1 trillion? Okay. So it's a circus. It's an absolute circus. None of that has any meaning whatsoever. And MBS now, it's clever and experienced enough to hedge his bets with some actual promises, which nobody knows how he's going to fulfill. But that, in terms of appeasing the big hegemon, it works fine. Trump bought it right away. And Saudi Arabia still, they look at BRICS, they say, okay, wait a little bit, maybe later. That's what it's a fascinating hedging game at the moment. And of course, they're looking at China. Chinese say, look, one day we're going to buy all your energy in Petro Yuan. Get ready. And they know that. And the deadline is approaching. So MBS is in an inviolable position. He has to juggle all that. But for the moment, he's managing Trump very, very well. Very, very clever. And because he also knows that what Trump wants is the normalization of Saudi Arabia-Israeli relations. The Saudis already said, yes, as long as the Palestinian problem is solved, which we know we won't. So there will be no rapprochement Saudi Arabia, Israel, obviously, you know. But the way IMBS has been managing the whole thing is it's not bad. It's not bad. It's the best he can do at the moment, considering he is squeezed in the middle. Huh?
We know that these Arab states are totally under the thumb of the United States, but after all, they have some sort of, I don't know how we can call it. We can call it sovereignty. We can call it national
Limited,
pride. And
extremely limited sovereignty, Nima,
yeah,
to help our formulation. Some of them has zero sovereignty. Some, like the Emirates, because they have unlimited funds, they can play a little bit more. And Saudi Arabia, the same thing. And Qatar, of course, because Qatar punches way above their weight because of their Islamist connections everywhere. By the way, did you see the emir visiting the former head shopper, now president of Syria? It's what the Qataris wanted for 13 years, Nima, and they got it on a plate. Of course, not on a plate like that. They spent a little bit of money buying weapons for those people when they were still in Idlib. So now the emir is going to Syria to collect. So Qatar is, and Qatar, of course, Qatar, American bases in Qatar. Qatar is it's a very complicated story. It's fascinating to follow. They're very good at hedging their bets, but they are much more forceful compared to Saudi Arabia. And they don't disguise their Islamist leanings, connections, support, etc., including for head shoppers.
the
Wow.
situation with the situation with Qatar is so interesting because on one side we know that there is a good relationship between Iran and Qatar, and on the other hand, because if you remember when Saudi Arabia together with other Arab states were isolating Qatar, we had Iranians and Russians and maybe Turkey helping them.
Yes.
And here comes the question: how is that going to play for them in Syria? How is that going to benefit them in Syria?
We don't know. Nobody knows, Nima. If anybody says they
Is that
know,
about the pipeline from Qatar to?
exactly. The number one, let's say, Qatari interest, which they had manifested since 2010, at least, or even before, is that famous gas pipeline, which will have to cut across Saudi Arabia as well before reaching Syria. So this means that the Saudis will have to approve this gas pipeline. That's not a done deal, far from it. But assuming that the Americans, for instance, would pressure Saudi Arabia to accept the Qatari pipeline, because this would be from an European point of view, would be a very good deal. But from a Trump administration point of view, would not be a very good deal. Why? Because they want to keep selling American LNG at exorbitant prices to the Europeans, even though they don't have enough LNG to sell the Europeans because of their liquefaction capabilities, which are very restricted. And this explains why the Europeans are buying more Russian and LNG now than before, paying 3 or 4 times the price via all sorts of middlemen, because the Americans cannot export everything that the EU needs. So they wouldn't want competition from Qatar with this pipeline. So this pipeline is a very complicated thing to have. All these major pipelines, the Turkmenistan, Afghanistan, Pakistan, India pipeline, the TAP. This story has been going on for 15 years at least. And still, maybe, and now the maybe is fascinating because the Russians are getting into the picture. The Russians are trying to get Afghanistan in the bag, and in fact, they have already. This is something that I saw at the Vladivostok Forum last year when there was an important Afghan delegation being paraded around by top Russian ministers and businessmen, etc. They're going to start selling gas to Afghanistan via convoys. The next step, would be building a pipeline. So instead of having a Turkmenistan, Afghanistan, Pakistan, India pipeline, we could have a Russia, Afghanistan, and Russia, Uzbekistan, for instance. Russia, Uzbekistan, Afghanistan, Pakistan pipeline. India, same thing. Very complicated, long term. It depends on India-Pakistan relations. But if one day this pipeline would be built, which we'll never know, this is one of the running pipeline sagas. I've been following this for 15 years. I love following this because it's immensely complicated, and we know that in the end, nothing's going to happen. But then the Russians Gazprom will be directly involved because they want to bring Afghanistan into the Shanghai Cooperation Organization. Then the Russians can get all these on the table at the SCO and say, look, let's build a pipeline which is going to be good not only for us, for obvious reasons, Gazprom, but for you Afghans, for you Pakistanis, and for you Indians. And they might eventually agree, So that's what is fascinating in all this pipeline story. When we see a pipeline that works, usually it's because the Americans were behind it. Example, the BTC, Baku, Tbilisi, Ceyhan. From that, the Israelis get 40% of their oil. Azeri oil travels through the pipeline, arrives in Turkey, and then goes to Israel. Or when it's Russia and China, Power of Siberia 1, major success, and Power of Siberia 2, which may start around 2030. They're still haggling about prices. So if you have a mega player behind, the Americans or Russia and China, the pipelines are done. If you have middle players, it gets immensely complicated, and usually it doesn't work.
We were, Pepe, we were so confused about Donald Trump and his policies in Gaza. I think right now we can have a clear picture of what he's talking about. Ceasefire, getting back the hostages to Israel, and right now he's talking about emptying Gaza, rebuilding Gaza for settlers. And he repeated again yesterday that he's gonna force and he's gonna be successful in forcing Egypt and Jordan in accepting Palestinians in their land. And just that would mean that just emptying Gaza and rebuilding that for settlers. And he was so confident in that. He said, they're going to accept it. I'm going to force them to accept it. And he repeated that.
You said the key phrase, Nima. I'm going to force them to accept it. This is the key.
And how do you think with that little sovereignty that you mentioned about these Arab states, that would work against Donald Trump to not accept the way that Donald Trump is trying to force them, or they're going to go along with Donald Trump and his strategy?
Well, come on, in the geopolitical scheme of things, if we look at Northeast Africa and West Asia, Egypt and Jordan, they don't count for much. Egypt said over and over again, no. But this is for public consumption. Depending on the size of the Samsonite full of cash that arrives in Cairo, the next day they're going to say yes. So you cannot trust Sisi, number one. Number two, the little king in Jordan. Nobody trusts him. And his popularity at home is a disaster. And most of the population in Jordan is Palestinian on top of it. So assuming Sisi and the little king Abdullah would accept it, they will have civil wars in both countries at no time. So they will have to kill a lot of their own population to make this stick. The powers of persuasion of the empire, as we know, are infinite still. economic pressure, color revolution, Samsonites full of cash, you name it, hybrid war in every declination. Yes, we know that. And Trump really means it. He really means it because in his mind, as a businessman involved in real estate, for him, Gaza is an open real estate opportunity in a, between commas, his own words, phenomenal location. And as we know, number one rule of real estate speculation is location, location, location. So in his mind, this is what Gaza is. He doesn't care. Okay, I have to police myself. About Palestinians, Gaza, right of return, sovereignty, Palestinian state, nothing. Doesn't. He only sees that as a fabulous real estate opportunity. That may include later on Trump casinos, Trump condos, whatever. So in his extremely rarefied and circumscribed view of the Palestinian tragedy, this is what it amounts to. So we can expect trouble in this front, certainly, especially because his vision is exactly the vision of those Old Testament cycles in Tel Aviv. Not to mention all the Ziocons in US, across the Beltway, in Virginia, Maryland, in Washington, in the international financial system, in New Jersey, New York, everywhere. So we're going to have trouble, Nima, unfortunately. All of us, our audience, expect major trouble by Trump 2.0 on Gaza and legitimizing the second phase of the destruction of Gaza, which has already been more or less announced by those cycles, that the war has to stop. It's just a ceasefire, and they will continue to do what they were doing before. This means the genocide will be back. As horrifying as for all of us to admit, the genocide is not over yet.
And the government, no, these people in Syria are asking Russia to. Yeah, the president right now, yeah, he's going to be the president in this transitional period, as they're talking about. But they're asking Russia to bring Bashar al-Assad back to Syria and to.
That's a non-starter. That's a non-starter because Putin gave Assad asylum personally. He will never be betrayed. This is a state decision. It's very, very serious. They're bargaining, Nima. They are positioning themselves to extract as much as they can from the Russians. And this is one of my questions here, which I hope to have a better answer in the next few days. How much is Russia willing to pay to keep Tartus and Hmeimim? What's the limit? What's the real Russian red line? Because there's a lot of people, so far I noticed that there's a lot of very well-informed people here who say, no, leave it. That's it. We are already moving to a base in Libya. There's Egypt as plan B. That's it. It will be more than enough for what we want to do as a base to supply our forces in Africa, which this is all about, essentially. They don't need these bases in the Eastern Mediterranean anymore, especially if they have to make a deal with the head choppers that they were bombing until literally yesterday. Russian public opinion won't take this lightly at all. At all. So this is a very difficult decision. Well, you saw the first Russian delegation that went to Damascus to start discussions, and apparently it was very tough. So, but at least this is the start of a negotiation. But it's going to be a very tough negotiation, and the Russians are not willing to be blackmailed by the former head choppers. That's the key. At the same time, they want to keep good relations with the new Syrian apparatus, of course, because nothing is, everything is impermanent, to be Buddhist about it. So this thing might change in the near future, or even in a future nearer than many of us expect. The new president, he has no popular support. He doesn't have even support from Turkey. That's very, very important. This is something that I was discussing in Istanbul last week. So, and because Turkey was expecting something different from the whole thing, and in the end, they got much more than they can manage. And Turkey doesn't have the military capability and the funds to manage or annex or rule over Western Syria. They were counting on Aleppo only, but all the way to Damascus is too much for them. And obviously, this guy, as come on, this guy is a terrorist incubated in Camp Buka in Iraq, a terrorist incubated in an American gulag in Iraq. So, you don't change this mentality from one day to another just because you have a Hugo Boss costume. It's ridiculous. He will try to blackmail all the players around. He doesn't know how long he's going to last because his real masters may throw him out at the first opportunity. They are hardcore, even more hardcore Islamists. They're already rebelling against him because they want a Sharia law and an Islamist caliphate style government in Syria, and it apparently is not going to happen, at least not yet. So he's not. He may be enjoying his little margin of maneuver for a while, but that won't last long. And Turkey, they're mulling in Ankara. Okay, what are we going to do with Syria, and how much we want, how much we can discard, who are our real puppets or vassals or people we can trust, especially. So, it's for Ankara, lots of very hard decisions ahead.
I don't know if you saw the interview of the Iranian president Pezeshkian with the Russian channel. It's
No,
channel
I haven't
one.
yet. No.
The guy who interviewed him he's so prominent in Russia. He's so famous in Russia. He's one of the main interviewer podcasters in Russia. And in that interview, Pezeshkian said that the relationship with Russia is just going to improve and getting better and better.
That's
In terms
correct.
of security and militarily. He has emphasized that. It seems that the situation in Syria is putting Russia and Iran in a position that they have no choice but getting closer and closer in terms of security and military. And they try to, as you mentioned, they try to manage the situation in Syria. But we know, after all, this sort of Sharia law or Khalifa or whatever they call it is not going to be close to the policies of Iran and Russia in that region. How do you see the way that these two countries are perceiving or are understanding the situation in Syria and the future, the outcome of this for their relationship? Is that, as the president of Iran was telling us, is so serious that they're gonna maybe, because it's not just about Syria, it's about the whole region, the security of the whole region between Russia and Iran, that region, Central Asia, the region between Iran and Russia, Middle East, all together.
Too early to tell, Anima. Like we're discussing, the Russians, they sent already their first mission. It was very tough, so they will reconsider. Negotiations have started at least. So depending on what do they negotiate on the basis, if they stay, and what kind of mechanisms they're going to have to partnerships, let's say, with the new Syrian government. Too early to tell. And the Iranians, they are not as advanced as the Russians in terms of talking to the new powers or the new soul self-described power in Damascus. And obviously, they have a better fish to fry running Russia, which everything around the strategic partnership and establishing the corridors, the economic corridors, investment in the international north-south transportation corridor, all that. These exchanges, gas exchanges, Gazprom helping the energy complex, the industrial energy complex in Iran and all that. So it will depend on what happens in Syria in the next few months. And in fact, all these three big players, Turkey, Iran, and Syria, they are on a waiting seat. Okay, who we're going to have to actually deal with in Damascus? Nobody knows. Nobody knows. And not even the people who live in Damascus, right? Can you imagine that a bunch of HTS goons who were running Idlib until yesterday have the know-how, the savviness, and the management skills to run Damascus and the machinery of the Syrian government? Obviously not. So what's going to happen? It could be, the whole thing could go. It has already collapsed, but it won't be rebuilt so fast. So Turkey, Iran, and Russia are waiting. The famous Astana. Isn't that ironic, Nima, that the three powers were negotiating the Astana process to stabilize Syria and the start of a new Syria? Now they are outside looking in and trying to make sense of the total wreckage that it's Syria now. So history is fascinating, isn't it? We have these reorganizations, geopolitical, geoeconomic, geographic, military, happen in a flash, in a matter of a few weeks, if you think about it. And now they are outsiders looking in.
Yeah. Getting back to the conflict in Ukraine before wrapping up this session.
Yes, I'm sorry because I have to go. I'm so sorry about it. And Moscow never stops. It's a carousel.
It can go. European Union Financial Times reported that the Europeans are talking about the return of Russian gas.
Oh, yes.
Here comes the question. Do they really want it to buy it from, I don't know, India, Turkey, and other countries, or they're going to receive it directly from Russia if they go in that range?
Yes. We still don't know, Nima, because for the moment they are buying from third parties and paying a fortune, including the profit that the middlemen are imposing. So if they buy directly from Russia again, this would halt. This is one measure that would halt what we're watching now, which is the inevitable industrial suicide of the European Union. But until we get there, Nima, wow. This would only happen after some sort of US-Russia deal on Ukraine. And this is something that we still don't know if it's going to happen or how long will it take to have something at least approaching the idea, Considering the Russophobic campaign of these past 3 years, especially, considering that the European Union and especially the European Commission, side by side with NATO, everything that they did to demonize Russia and basically everything regarding Ukraine is the fault of those evil barbarians. How they're going to backtrack from this? Okay, they can, because these people have no principles, no nothing, They can. And they can, and they will even try to start. They're already trying to start selling to public opinion that it's too complicated. Maybe we should. And consider their mediocrity as well, because they are only doing this because the big guy already said, "I'm cutting off help to Ukraine. It's up to you Europeans to pay, and from now on, NATO, you have to pay 5%." And all the chihuahuas yapping like that. So that's where we are. But as in your question, is inbuilt Annalena style 360 degrees. In this case, it's going to be really 180 by Brussels, which none of us can see happening right now or in the near future. Only, of course, if his master's voice tells them to do it. That's another story. And the tell them to do it is already starting, which is 5% for NATO, or, we don't care. It's not going to come from us anymore. And obviously, if they look at the battlefield, they know that this thing is going to end up perhaps until the end of the year, the whole thing. So they're going to have to readjust. But don't never underestimate the intergalactic stupidity of the elites in Brussels, Nima. Never, never. And all of you in our audience, never. These people are beyond redemption. All of them. All this bureaucratic bureaucracy of over 30,000 functionaries, which only think about their own retirement package, essentially, These are opportunists, mediocre opportunist people. It's the absolute opposite of a meritocratic system. And people who get inside the EU and the machine of the EU, it's connections, it's not merit. And the ones who have merit, they are sidelined. I've met a few cases, They are sidelined on purpose because you have to follow, it's a pyramid structure. And as it stands in the European Commission, you have to follow what the toxic Medusa is telling you to do. That's it. Otherwise, you're sidelined. It's absolutely horrible. It's something Kafka would never have dreamed of, But they're cowards at the same time. If his master voice says, from now on, this is what you're going to do, they will do it.
Unfortunately. Muito obrigado, Pepe. Grande prazer, como sempre. And desejo tudo de melhor aí.
Para você também. E a gente vai falar de Moscou nas próximas semanas. Eu vou ficar aqui algumas semanas.
Sim. Assim. Vai ter muita coisa para explicar para gente.
And all of you, our audience, thank you, everybody, and thank you for your patience, because it's tough, to say the least.
So tough, yeah, that's so tough. See you.
Okay. Cheers from us, everybody. Thank you. Thank you, Dima. Thanks, everybody.